Hello, it's Deborah from Attic Lane and I'm here with you today to share 8 cards I made from one kit. The kit is called Julie Loves Wildflowers and it's the December 2017 kit. I sound a bit wheezy and sneezy, but I'll try not to make too many horrible noises as I show you the 8 cards. So this is the kit, this is what I received. The pad is really rather nice. It's single-sided, so you don't have to make difficult choices over the colours of paper that you might want to use. And the pages coordinate beautifully, and the theme for this is wildflowers. There are a number of sheets that have 9, on each sheet there are 9 little circles with sentiments in them, and then there are sheets that have little pop-out flowers on them, and you can pop these out and curl the petals around and layer them up. And then this sheet is all about ribbons, and I'll show you how to use those as we go through the kit. They always include something extra, and this is a little something extra for you, and it's some little pop-outs, and when you pop them out and shape them they make little birdhouses. It's really cute. This is a sheet that has some ideas and some inspiration for how to use the kit, and this leaflet has more ideas about things you could buy that will coordinate with the Wildflowers kit. There are absolutely loads of these. These are great toppers. You can use these for birthdays, just to say hello, for someone special, and there are lots of them, so you have an opportunity to use the same one more than once, and I'll show you that in my next card. I was quite pleased with these. I managed to chop off the beginning of card 1. I decided that I was going to add some little splashes of colours that would coordinate with the colours in the kit. So I've got orange, pink and green, and I laid down some colour on my craft mat and spritzed it with water, and then I just used a paintbrush to pick up the ink and splash it onto a plain white top folding card. I'm using one of the toppers from the sheets of toppers, and I'm using my scalpel to cut around the outside edge. I want to keep that lovely silver border because the silver has got a really nice twinkle to it, and I want to keep the butterflies, so I'm going to cut around this and I'm going to leave the butterflies popping out of that frame. It's quite easy to do because those butterflies aren't complicated shapes, and you could do this with scissors as well. And I'll show you the completed piece. There it is with the butterflies popping out. I'm going to layer that onto my white base card, but I'm going to use a sheet of the green paper from the pack as a background. I'm going to cut this down to size so that it fits across the centre of my card. I'm using my pencil just to measure out exactly where I need to cut it so that it fits perfectly, and I'm going to use a tape runner to add some glue and stick this onto my base card. Now, because I have a lot of these toppers and they are the same design, I can cut out more butterflies, and that's what I'm doing here. You do sacrifice the topper, but I'm going to make sure I do use all of it. So that centerpiece that says "Have a lovely day," I'm going to cut that out. I'm going to add it to my card so it gives it a little bit more dimension. This is craft foam. I use this quite a lot when I want to add dimension, and I've cut out a square that will fit inside the "Have a lovely day," and I've glued it and I'm sticking it into position. And because I have some of the flowers still on the piece that I cut out, I can line it up perfectly with the rest of that square sentiment. Once I glue on my extra butterflies that I cut out, my card will be complete. For my second card, I'm going to use 2 of the sheets that coordinate from the pad, and I'm going to use one of the round sentiments from the pop-outs. I've cut these down to size, and I'm going to glue one on the top and one on the bottom so that I have 2 different pages on the top and the bottom of my card, and I'm going to link them with a strip of green paper that I've also taken from the pad, and I'll cut that down to size and then I'll glue that into position as well. I'm using a wet glue because then I have opportunities to move that strip around. I'm going to add a ribbon in the centre, and the way that you use the ribbons is you pop out the piece that has tabs on the end as well as a little link in the middle, and you fold them over and glue them in the centre on the reverse. Just pop those out and make sure that they have some depth and dimension. You could stick in a little foam pad inside each of those little ribbon loops to help it hold its shape if you're putting this through the mail. Then you stick that onto the base ribbon that has the fishtail endings to it on the sides. There's a coordinating colour strip, and if you put that around the centre and glue it in the reverse of the ribbon, it gives the effect of it being a lovely little bow. And I'm going to add that to the centre of my card in the centre of the green strip. The last thing I'm going to do on this card, because this is quite a simple card, is I'm going to add the little round sentiment to the top of the ribbon, and my card is finished. That's all it needs. It's a nice simple card, and you could make so many of these using the different colourways in the kit. For my next card, I'm using a craft card base that's top folding, and I've already cut a sheet of green and a sheet of orange, slightly smaller than each other. I've made up one of the bows, one of the larger bows from the kit, and I've also taken one of the flowers, and I'm going to glue the flower into the middle of my little ribbon. I'm using my Cottage Cuts stitch circle dies, and there's one that is slightly larger than the circular Thinking of You sentiment, so I've used that to cut out a piece of orange paper, and I'm going to use that to back my sentiment. I'm using some craft foam, and I'm going to use my smaller circle to cut out a bit of foam that will stick nicely in the centre reverse of that sentiment, and I'm also going to use it to help me give some dimension to this green strip that I want to be like a bit of ribbon hanging down from the bow at the top of the card. So I'm sticking on a piece of craft foam, and I'm going to cut that down very, very thin so that it's a very, very fine little thread coming down from my ribbon. I'll glue my ribbon into place now and position that in the top of my card. I'll add my little round circle to give me an idea of how long I want my green pretend piece of ribbon to be, and then I'll cut it to size, I'll add some glue, and I'll stick it just below my bow. I'm gluing up the craft foam now, and that will also give a little bit of dimension to my sentiment. Here's a little flower getting popped into the ribbon. That's just to give it a little bit of different interest. And I'm also going to use some Nouveau gold to add a little dot into the centre of my little flower. I'm also adding I'm dotting the eyes on the thinking word to make that pop out as well. This card is a little bit different. I don't like measuring things, but this card does require some very basic measurements. I'm working out how I can cut an A4 sheet of card into 3 sections. I've used my ruler to mark in position where I want to score my card, and I'm scoring this down in more or less equal thirds. I'm really slow on this because I'm stopping to double check and work it out. It's not that complicated. I just made it look complicated. Here you see the result. This is what we're aiming for, and it's a tall card at the moment, but that's okay because we can cut that down. Here is my card cut down to size. I've not measured this, I've gone with what looks right, and I'm making a note in the centre panel that that is the inside panel. I've chosen the size of my card based on one of the square toppers. This one says Sending Love, and I've used a square die to cut out from that centre panel. That's the one that I marked saying inside, so that I knew which one I would need to make the cut into. Having made that cut, I've made sure that the die would take the Sending Love topper, so it's an ideal size. I'm going to trim the edges of my square topper now to make it fit nicely into the centre of my 3-fold card, and that's fine. I'm really pleased with that. I think that looks very pretty. It's nice and simple, but it's got enough interest there. But I'm going to add more interest. This card is based on a card that I bought some years ago in Budapest, and I like the card because it's not a thick, deep shaker card, but it has got a whole lot of shaky going on, and I took it apart to find out how they'd done it. This is a piece of ordinary packaging, and I'm taking the corner section from the packaging. Now what they did to make my Hungarian card was they put a sentiment inside a little polythene bag, and that's what we're going to do. So I'm cutting this down, I'm just trimming down the edges just to make sure that it fits and it gives me enough space to add glue around the outside and hold it into position on the inside of my three-fold card. There are a number of ways that you could do this. If you have any of those polythene bag sealing tools, you could use that as well. I opted to use my tape runner because I think that's something that more people will have in their collection, except my tape runner didn't want to play ball at this point. However, I've gone around the outside edges of my square topper, just the outside edges, and that will be enough to hold it into position inside my little plastic bag. These are some very chunky, tinsely, glittery bits. I've used them before on other shaker cards, and I don't need too much added in here, just enough to give the card a little bit of a shimmer. So I've had to be careful to make sure that I don't add that glitter onto my glue line, which remember is around the outside of that topper, but it means that when I position it in my plastic bag, the glitter will be held in position and it won't spill out everywhere. And I think that's a pretty neat way to use up excess packaging. I'm going to add a little bit of glue just to the reverse to hold the plastic into position. And that's it done. And this is going to be a great way to make all kinds of shaker cards much more easily, just using up your excess packaging. To secure my topper, I'm going to add a lot of glue on that inside page. Again, this is the one that I marked, and I'm going to add enough glue to hold everything into position. I've turned the card upside down so that I make sure I get my shaker element of the card in the right position in the little hole in the window, and I've added more glue so that I can seal the left side over the centerpiece. And then when I when I shake the card and test that it works, because I always have to do that with my cards, when I do that, it means that everything is in position, everything's held, the glitter hasn't seeped out and gone all over my desk, so I'm quite relieved about that. Now I'm taking a couple of the flowers, these are the pop-out flowers, and I'm just shaping them using my fingers to give them some extra dimension, and I'm going to add some glue to the reverse of those and stick one in the bottom left corner and one in the top right corner. And once I've done that, I'm going to add a couple of drops of Nouveau Crystal Drops Ivory Seashell into the centre of my little flowers. When they're dry, my card is complete. For card 5, I'm using some of the flowers that I've already popped out from the kits. I'm using the small flowers, and I'm going to layer these up. I'm going to start with 4, although when I actually make the card I will only use 3. To give them some extra dimension and shape, I'm going to roll them around my small pokey tool. Once all of my layers are ready, I'm going to use a wet glue to add all of the layers together. There are 3 altogether. I'm just using the end of my pokey tool to squash down the centre of the flower so that it grips and holds nicely. And that's how they look when they're finished. I don't usually use extra things that aren't in the kit, but Santa brought me a couple of little presents I wanted to use and I wanted to play with. But you could use any sentiment that you have. I will provide a link to the extra die cuts and the punch that I'm using below the video. I want to show you a technique that will enable you to have a split colour in your sentiment. So I've cut my die cut word hello out of pink and white card. I'm using the reverse of a post-it note to hold the hello in place. I'm not sticking it on there, I just need it to be held securely. Now I'm taking the white die cut and I'm positioning it on top. I'm not gluing it on top, I'm positioning it so that it sits exactly on top of the pink one underneath it, and then I'm securing both of them with another post-it note. These are the post-it notes that have a sticky backing all across the reverse. Holding them in position like that means that when I put them through my guillotine and cut part way down the word, the cut will happen at the same place for both the pink and the white word. And as I peel back the post-it note that's been holding them in place, I'm very careful not to shift those pieces, because I'm going to use the top part of the word as my anchor point so that I know exactly where to fit the word back together again. I've got a pink piece of paper from the paper pad, and I'm going to glue that into position on the front of the card. I've already cut it down to size, and I'm going to put the white part of my sentiment on the pink bit of the card and the pink bit of the word on the white part of the card. I'm going to use some more of the post-it note to hold the sentiment in place. It's still attached to the post-it note. I haven't removed it or taken it off, because that's how I know exactly where to position the little white pieces, and they are little. I should have cut this a little bit higher up, but it still shows you the effect that you get. And because these are very tiny pieces, I'm using a glue pen to go around the reverse and add glue and then stick them into position. Now that they're there, you can see how small they are. Now that they're there, I can remove the pink part of the word, and I can use my glue pen to go over the reverse, and then I'll stick it exactly so it aligns with the lower part of the white word. And I really hope that all makes sense. I think the pictures will help tell the story as much as the words, but you get the idea. Having got my sentiment lined up exactly where I want it, I can glue my little flowers into position and complete them with some gold nouveau drops. This is the other little toy Santa brought me. This is a Martha Stewart punch. I think it's called Branches. I will provide a link. And I wanted something in white to complement that big band of white across the top, and I needed something white to act on the pink as well. And I think these branches work perfectly. You could use any leaf die cut you have. For card 6, this is a nice simple card after the complexity of the previous card, and I've cut a sheet of paper from the paper pack so that it will fit on the front of a top folding card. I've glued it up, and I've left a little bit of a gluey space in the top centre third, because I'm going to die cut in the middle. So I'm using my Cottage Cuts stitched circle dies, and I've chosen one of the dies that is slightly bigger than the round sentiment that says lots of love. I've cut it out, and you can see the sentiment fits nicely in there, but I want to give it a border to make it pop a little more, so I'm using 2 of the dies this time, and I'll run them through my machine. I'm holding them in place with my favourite post-it note stuff again, and when I bring them out of the machine, there's a nice round border, and I can glue that into position on the front of my card. I'm going to protect the inside of my card with a little piece of tissue, just in case I miss and get glue on the inside. I don't want to damage my card at this point. With the border glued in place, I can add the sentiment. So I've glued it, and I'm going to add it through the top hole so that I know exactly where to position it. Now your card could be complete at this stage. You could make many of these in many different colourways using the kit, but I wanted to add a little bit of extra interest around the circle. So I've taken a piece of green paper from the pack, and I'm drawing 4 large hearts and 4 small hearts, and I'm going to cut these out, and I'm going to glue just in the centre of each of these hearts, and I'm going to stick them around the outside of my circle. I think I cut more than 4 of each. I can't count. For card 7, I'm using 2 of the bows because there are lots of these sheets, so you can use multiples, and I've made my bows, and I've also popped out 2 of the bow bases, and I've stuck them one on top of each other to form a sort of a cross. Now I want to show you a trick so that you get more out of these die cuts than you would expect. I'm using the negative space left behind from the bows as a stencil, and I can draw around my stencil, and I can use these now to cut out any number of any colour combinations of bow I like. I've cut out some of the little pink bows that I want to crisscross over my original, and I'm going to use some of the pattern paper to cut out the larger bow bases. I'm not sure what to call those. Bow bases seems wrong, but you see what I mean. I'm also going to do the same using some of the green paper from the paper pack. This is a great way to get the most out of your kit. Now that I've prepared all of my pieces, I'm going to assemble my design, and it's just a question of gluing and layering. I've layered up my pink bow bases and I'm gluing them onto the patterned bow base. I'm going to secure all of these with a brad, and so I want to put a hole through the middle, and that extra little bit of foam with all the implements sticking out of it, it's just how I store my pokey tools. I have them in a firm bit of foam, and it's very useful when I need to poke a hole that I don't want to go into my desk. I just use my foam base to poke into. This is going to be used to secure the top elements of my card together. I'm gluing together the larger of the bow bases in the green, and I will stick my top piece onto those, and now I'm going to do the same with the pattern paper. Now you can see the pattern is building up nicely, but I don't want to limit myself to the length of those bows, so I've cut some of them in half, and that means that I can position them anywhere that I want and I'm not limited by the length. And you could go on building up this design until it was as large as you wanted it to be. When it's finished, this design ends up being around about 4.5 by 4.5 inches square. I've got a piece of white top folding card which I've cut down to be a square that is only slightly larger than the design. I'm not going to add a sentiment to this because I think you could add a sentiment inside of the card, and I want the papers and the bows to be the standout elements on this card. For my final card, I've prepared some mats and layers that will sit on top of a plain white folding card, and I've cut out some more of the bows using the technique that I showed you on the previous card, and this time I'm layering them at angles on top of each other so that they create a sort of a flowery star. And I'm going to take one of the round elements and I'm going to glue that right into the centre of those. I've prepared some of the bows from green paper, and I've cut these down in the centre so that it's easier for me to position them where I want. And do note to add your glue to the top of the leaf, because that's what will stick on the reverse of your design. I got it wrong the first time. I've got some neutral coloured twine, and I'm wrapping this around the top 2 layers of my card and tying a little bow. I'm going to make sure that my star isn't covered over by too much of that twine, so I'm just going to cut it down as needed. I've got some sticky backed foam, and I'm going to add some of this to the reverse of my star design, but I'm leaving a gap in the middle so that it will fit nicely over the twine and that won't add any additional bulk. And that's my card finished. Now I'm going to leave you with some close-ups of all the cards that we've made today and a little music, and I hope you'll join me again soon.